At first, they were the ideal couple. A love story that captivated everyone who knew them. From the outside, they both had it all: 2 kids, a modest home, and a marriage that seemed like it was built to last. They were the picture of suburban perfection. But behind that facade, nobody in the quiet, working-class neighborhood of Macon, Georgia, suspected the twisted darkness growing. What began as a scandalous secret spiraled into a savage murder that would shake the town and leave a courtroom gasping in disbelief. What seemed like an ordinary evening would turn into the catalyst for an unimaginable tragedy. As the truth came to light, it shattered everything: the perfect marriage, the family, and most devastatingly, a life lost too soon. How do you go from happily ever after to a brutal murder in a matter of days? What happens when the lies we tell ourselves begin to unravel, and the truth becomes more than we can bear? This is the story of a betrayal that destroyed more than just a marriage. It's a reminder that sometimes, the things we think we know about the people closest to us are the things that can destroy us. Before we dive deeper into this shocking case, hit like and subscribe, where we bring you more gripping and mind-blowing tales of love, lies, and betrayal. Rashad and Tekyra Demry were the kind of couple that everyone envied. To the outside world, their life seemed nothing short of perfect. Rashad, at 31 years old, was a charming HVAC technician with a smile that could light up any room. His easygoing nature and infectious grin made him the kind of guy you'd want to invite to every barbecue, every gathering, and every celebration. Tekyra, just a year younger at 30, was his high school sweetheart, the love of his life. A devoted mother of 2 and a daycare owner, she exuded warmth and care, a woman who gave all of herself to her family. Their love story, one that began in the hallways of high school and blossomed into a seemingly unbreakable bond, was the kind that people loved to admire. They had been married for 6 years. 6 years of what appeared to be bliss. In their quiet, suburban neighborhood in Macon, Georgia, they were the epitome of a picture-perfect family. 2 young kids, a 3-bedroom house filled with laughter, and all the trappings of an ordinary yet fulfilling life. Tekyra worked hard to run her daycare, creating a safe, loving environment for the children who trusted her, while Rashad built a career in HVAC, making sure homes in the area were well kept and comfortable. Together, they made a great team. The Demry family had a reputation in their community. Neighbors respected them. They were the kind of couple who attended church regularly, helped out with local events, and seemed to be a pillar of stability. Their marriage appeared unshakable, the kind of union that others aspired to. But sometimes, when you look at people from the outside, you don't see the cracks beneath the surface. You don't know what happens when the doors close and the smiles fade. To the world, Rashad and Tekyra were living the American dream. They had everything: love, children, and respect. But there was a silent pressure mounting between them, a pressure that was starting to show in the subtle, small ways that things began to change. Rashad's charm remained ever present, but Tekyra's heart was heavy, weighed down by her unspoken fears and insecurities. They had it all, or so it seemed. But sometimes, the lives we think are perfect are the ones hiding the most darkness. It was only a matter of time before that darkness began to bleed through, tearing apart the picture-perfect facade they had so carefully constructed. And when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. Rashad Demry's dissatisfaction with his wife, Tekyra, had been building for months, festering beneath the surface like a quiet storm waiting to erupt. At first, it was subtle. The little things. Tekyra had always been the picture of devotion, dedicated to her children, her daycare, and her home, but slowly, Rashad started to see her through a more critical lens. He complained to his friends about her weight gain, her appearance. The woman who had once caught his eye now seemed to repulse him. The texts he sent to his closest confidants became more brutal, more explicit, as his contempt for her grew. He would call her nasty and disgusting, mocking her body and hygiene in the cruelest of ways. "It smelled like spoiled bologna down there," he wrote to one friend. "Like death and disappointment." The words were harsh, but they weren't just words. They reflected a deeper bitterness that had taken root in Rashad's heart, a bitterness he could no longer hide. The cracks in his marriage began to widen, his discontent leaking into every conversation, every thought, every part of his life. Yet, instead of confronting Tekyra with his growing frustration, he buried it, choosing instead to vent to friends and family. But inside, Rashad was suffocating. The resentment gnawed at him, suffocating the love that had once been there. But Rashad didn't walk away. No, instead of seeking an escape from the woman he no longer desired, he found an outlet much closer than anyone could have imagined. His eyes, along with his growing desire, turned to someone far more dangerous, far more forbidden. Tekyra's younger sister, Jasmine Gaston, was everything Tekyra wasn't. At 25 years old, Jasmine had built her own reputation as a bartender with a flair for Instagram selfies and a rebellious streak that made her a fixture on social media. She was known for her provocative posts, her flirtations, and her bad girl attitude. She was the complete opposite of Tekyra's nurturing, devoted nature. And for Rashad, that made her irresistible. It started innocently enough, just a shared drink after a family cookout. Tekyra, already nursing a migraine and exhausted from a long day, had passed out early, leaving Rashad and Jasmine to themselves. What happened next seemed almost inevitable. Rashad, fueled by alcohol and resentment, found himself drawn to his sister-in-law in a way he never had before. Jasmine, dressed in booty shorts and playful confidence, knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't blind to Rashad's shifting gaze. She wasn't naive. And so, as the night wore on, their casual conversation turned into something much more dangerous. One drink led to another, and before they knew it, they were tangled in an illicit embrace. That night marked the beginning of a secret, passionate affair that lasted for 6 months. They met in the dead of night, sneaking around in the shadows of Tekyra's own home. Sometimes, they would lie in the very bed that Rashad once shared with his wife, their bodies entwined in a betrayal that was as visceral as it was dangerous. They told themselves it was just a fling, a temporary escape, but the truth was much darker. With every stolen moment, Rashad's contempt for Tekyra grew, while his lust for her sister deepened. Jasmine, for her part, wasn't innocent. She knew the power she held over Rashad, knew how to feed his ego and desires in ways that Tekyra couldn't. The two of them were playing with fire, and they didn't care. What began as an affair fueled by resentment and opportunity slowly evolved into something far more destructive. Rashad was no longer just sneaking around to satisfy his own lustful urges, he was emotionally invested in Jasmine in a way he hadn't been with Tekyra in years. But it wasn't love that kept them together. No, it was something far more sinister. And as their affair progressed, the lies and betrayal piled up, all while Tekyra remained completely unaware of the storm brewing within her own home. The affair was a secret, one that Rashad would take to his grave, or so he thought. But secrets have a way of coming to light, and when they do, they shatter everything in their path. What had started as a way for Rashad to escape the dissatisfaction eating away at him would soon set the stage for a tragedy that no one, least of all Tekyra, could have predicted. As the affair between Rashad and Jasmine deepened, so did Rashad's devotion to the younger sister he had once treated as family. It wasn't enough for him to sneak around in the shadows anymore, now he started spoiling her, lavishing her with gifts and attention. Every week seemed to bring something new, beauty treatments, designer clothes, even paying for Jasmine's rent. But the most shocking of all was when Rashad, in a twisted effort to keep Jasmine satisfied, footed the bill for a Brazilian but lived in Houston. This wasn't the Rashad anyone knew, the loving father, the devoted husband. No, this was a man consumed by lust and bitterness, a man so deep in his lies that he was willing to do anything to keep the affair alive. Meanwhile, Tekyra, blissfully unaware of the world shattering around her, began to notice the changes in her husband. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something felt off. Her intuition screamed that something wasn't right, but she could never quite grasp it. Her suspicions were there, lurking just beneath the surface. Yet, Tekyra was too deeply entrenched in her own insecurities to see the truth. She blamed herself, convinced that it was her fault. Her weight had crept up over the past few years, and she hated the way she felt in her own body. Rashad didn't find her attractive anymore, she thought. Maybe if she lost a few pounds, maybe if she showered more, maybe if she spiced up their sex life again, everything would go back to normal. So she tried. She worked hard to reclaim what she had lost. She started eating healthier, exercising, and, in an effort to reignite the intimacy between them, she bought new lingerie and began showering him with affection. But it was too late. Rashad's heart was no longer hers, and no amount of effort on Tekyra's part could change that. The man she had married had already checked out emotionally, his heart, and his desire, now firmly set on her younger sister. Jasmine knew exactly how to manipulate Rashad. With her youthful charm and seductive whispers, she poisoned his mind against Tekyra. She called her basic, nasty, and boring, slowly eroding any positive feelings Rashad still had for his wife. Each word Jasmine spoke sank deeper into Rashad's mind, fueling the resentment that had been simmering there for so long. Rashad, who had once adored Tekyra, now saw her through the lens of Jasmine's venomous words. He began to hate her, truly hate her, with a fiery passion that surprised even him. And every time Jasmine whispered into his ear, Rashad felt more justified in his actions. Tekyra had let herself go, she was unattractive, and, according to Jasmine, she was nothing but a burden. But it wasn't just the emotional manipulation. No, Jasmine's influence over Rashad became more insidious, more dangerous. She wasn't just convincing him that his wife was unworthy of him, she was stoking the fire, making him feel that he deserved more. She told him, time and time again, that Tekyra had failed him, that she was the one who had ruined everything, that he didn't owe her anything. Rashad was consumed by this new reality, where his own bitterness towards Tekyra gave him the justification he needed to act on his darker impulses. He no longer saw the woman he had vowed to cherish as a partner, a mother, or even a person. Instead, he saw her as an obstacle in the way of his happiness with Jasmine. And then came the moment that shattered everything. Rashad, in a fit of pure venom, told Jasmine something he had been holding onto for far too long. In a low, guttural voice, he muttered the words that would set everything into motion. "I can't even stand the smell of her anymore," he said. "She's rotting from the inside." Those words, harsh and unforgiving, were the breaking point, the moment when the idea of murder first crossed Rashad's mind. For the first time, he didn't just resent his wife, he saw her as a problem that needed to be solved. It wasn't just the affair anymore. It wasn't just about dissatisfaction or betrayal. No, Rashad had crossed a line, and in his mind, there was only one way to get rid of the problem. He had fallen so far into the pit of hatred that murder, though unspoken, became a reality. The lies had twisted his perception of Tekyra so much that he no longer saw her as the woman he had loved, he saw her as an obstacle to his new life with Jasmine. The resentment, the anger, the hatred, it all culminated in that one, damning phrase, "rotting from the inside." And from that moment on, Rashad knew that nothing, not even his wife's life, could stand in the way of the life he wanted with Jasmine. The seeds of violence had been planted, and they would soon grow into something far more deadly than anyone could have imagined. July 7, 2023, was supposed to be just another hot summer day in Macon, Georgia. But for Tekyra Demry, it became the day her world finally shattered. She had been fighting that sinking feeling for weeks, that gnawing suspicion that her husband, Rashad, wasn't just growing distant, but hiding something, or someone. It wasn't until she got into Rashad's truck to grab his phone charger that fate handed her the truth. In the glove compartment, under a crumpled fast food bag and an old mechanic invoice, was a receipt. Not just any receipt, but a confirmation of payment for a Brazilian butt lift. Tekyra's breath caught in her throat as she read the name on the document, Jasmine Gaston. Her baby sister. Her flesh and blood. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Not yet. She walked back into the house like nothing was wrong. She made dinner, helped the kids brush their teeth, and kissed them goodnight. But after they were asleep, she went into the guest bedroom, grabbed her old iPad, and created a burner Instagram account. She chose a random name, something basic and unassuming, and sent Jasmine a message pretending to be a fan asking about her surgery. It took less than 10 minutes for Jasmine to reply. "Girl, it was worth every penny," she wrote, followed by a photo of herself in a towel, posing in front of the mirror in Rashad and Tekyra's bathroom. The same shower curtain Tekyra had picked out. The same chipped tile floor she'd scrubbed herself. There was no denying it anymore. It was over. The next morning, Tekyra waited for the kids to leave with her cousin for a weekend sleepover. Then she turned to Rashad and said quietly, "I know everything." She held up the receipt. She didn't yell. She didn't throw anything. But Rashad? He exploded. He lunged at her, screaming that she was crazy, paranoid, trying to tear the family apart. He denied it, of course. Gaslit her. Mocked her. But Tekyra wasn't backing down this time. And that's when something in him snapped. According to the coroner's report, Rashad stormed down the hallway and ripped open the closet door. He pulled out a red fire extinguisher, the kind Tekyra had begged him to throw away months ago, and brought it crashing down on her head. Once. Twice. Over and over. She was still breathing when Rashad dragged her limp frame into the bathroom and threw her into the tub. What happened next was the kind of cruelty that sends seasoned detectives into therapy. Rashad grabbed a bottle of bleach from under the sink, unscrewed the cap, and poured it over her lower body, right between her legs. As Tekyra slipped in and out of consciousness, he shouted, "This what stinks. This right here. This is the rot." Then he went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and came back to stab her. 7 times. All in her lower abdomen. Rage, shame, hate. It all bled out of him as he plunged the knife into the woman who had once trusted him with everything. When it was done, Rashad was shaking. Covered in blood. Breathing hard. Minutes later, he picked up his phone and called Jasmine, weeping and screaming, "It's done. I did it for you." She gone. There was a pause on the other end. Then Jasmine's voice came through, cold and flat. "Calm down, clean that shit up," she told him, and hung up. There was no sign of panic. No sign of remorse. Just instructions. Cold. Calculated. And damning. The morning after Tekyra's murder, the sun rose over Macon like it always did, quiet, warm, and indifferent to the horror that had unfolded inside the Demry household. But behind those suburban blinds, Rashad was already in motion, trying to rewrite what couldn't be undone. He started staging a break-in. Smashing the kitchen window from the inside out, knocking over furniture, smearing Tekyra's blood across the back door like a desperate smear campaign against reality. He even went so far as to toss his own wallet out into the front yard, trying to suggest a robbery gone wrong. But what Rashad didn't realize, or maybe forgot in his panic, was that Tekyra had recently reinstalled their Ring security system just 2 weeks earlier, after a neighbor's house had been burglarized. The camera, mounted discreetly above the front door, caught everything. Footage showed Rashad dragging Tekyra's limp body down the hallway like discarded luggage. At one point, he paused near the front window, still clutching the bloodied fire extinguisher. He made a phone call. Though the audio was faint, prosecutors said it was clear he was speaking to Jasmine. "I told you I'd handle it," he hissed into the phone. "Ain't no going back now." It was already too late. A neighbor had heard the chaos the night before. Thuds, a woman's screams, then silence. But it was the image of Rashad pacing back and forth on the front lawn, shirtless and soaked in blood, that finally pushed them to call the police. When officers arrived just after 6:30 a.m., Rashad was standing barefoot in the driveway, hands trembling, blood drying on his forearms. "She dead," he said flatly. "Somebody broke in. I came home and found her like that." But his eyes were wild, and his breathing uneven. The officers asked to enter the house. They didn't need to go far. The living room was in disarray, but staged. Too staged. The coffee table was overturned but unbroken. Picture frames had been tossed, yet none were cracked. The real evidence was in the garage, where officers found the fire extinguisher tucked beneath a blanket. Blood was still splattered along the rim. Inside the home, the trail of blood and bleach told a story Rashad could no longer control. But it was the ring footage that sealed it. Once detectives reviewed the camera feed, they returned to Rashad with one thing: the truth. In the interrogation room, he lasted an hour before cracking. His breakdown wasn't tearful. It was angry. Explosive. Vindictive. "I couldn't take it no more," he snarled, slamming his fist against the metal table. "She was disgusting. Always sweating, always smelling like old mop water. How was I supposed to lay up with that when her sister looked like a damn video vixen?" His words were venomous. There was no remorse. Just fury. Within days, Jasmine Gaston was arrested at the bar where she worked. At first, she played dumb, insisting she had no idea what Rashad had done. But the digital trail betrayed her. Text message logs, timestamps, and even surveillance from a nearby gas station showed her frequent visits to the Demry home during the affair. And then came the biggest discovery: Jasmine had accessed Rashad's phone after his arrest, while he was being held in the local jail. And deleted dozens of incriminating texts and voicemails. She had used his fingerprint while he was unconscious in the back of the patrol car, his hand limp from shock and adrenaline. Digital forensics uncovered the deletion timeline, and that was enough to hit her with serious charges: conspiracy to commit murder and destruction of evidence. The perfect marriage was gone. So was Tekyra. And now, the two people who destroyed her life were being dragged into the spotlight to answer for what they had done. The courtroom was packed. Every bench filled, every eye locked on the man who once posed for family photos with matching t-shirts and a perfect smile. But now, Rashad Demry sat slouched in a county-issued jumpsuit, his eyes hollow, his hands shackled, while the prosecution tore the last pieces of his facade to shreds. They weren't just presenting evidence, they were unraveling a man who, brick by brick, had built a tower of contempt toward the woman he once swore to love. Prosecutors played audio messages recovered from Rashad's phone, vulgar, cruel Snapchats he had sent to Jasmine. "I swear, I can smell her from the damn living room," he sneered in one. In another, he imitated Tekyra's voice in a mocking, nasally tone, while Jasmine laughed in the background. But it was the video footage and forensic testimony that broke the courtroom's composure. A medical examiner detailed how Tekyra had still been alive, if barely, when Rashad poured bleach over her body. The chemical burns. The bruising. The stab wounds. Tekyra's mother, who had sat stoically through most of the trial, let out a wail and collapsed to the floor when that detail was revealed. Her sobs echoed against the walls like the haunting sound of grief itself. The defense tried their best to shift the narrative. They painted Rashad as a man pushed to the brink by years of emotional manipulation, framing Tekyra as controlling, dismissive, and withholding. They argued that Rashad suffered from a mental break, temporary insanity, triggered by years of built-up sexual frustration and psychological strain. But the jury saw through it. They saw a man who had options: therapy, divorce, separation, but instead chose brutality. Chose to blame and butcher rather than walk away. After 4 hours of deliberation, the verdict was unanimous: guilty of first-degree murder. When the judge read the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, the courtroom held its breath. Then, from the back, a voice pierced through. "Why you kill my mama?" It was Tekyra's oldest son. 8 years old. His voice cracked with confusion and pain no child should ever carry. And then, just like that, the boy broke into sobs, clinging to his grandmother's leg as if she were the last piece of his world still standing. And then came Jasmine. Jasmine tried to distance herself, claiming she didn't know Rashad was going to kill his wife, that she was just caught in a bad situation. But the evidence said otherwise. The manipulation. The mockery. Faced with overwhelming proof, Jasmine took a plea deal, 18 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder and destruction of evidence. She cried during sentencing, tears that came only after the verdict, never once during the heartbreaking testimony of the children, the mother, the friends who spoke of Tekyra's kindness and resilience. Prosecutors called her emotion convenient. The murder rocked the Macon community, not just for its brutality, but for its grotesque motivation. A man didn't just kill his wife, he tried to destroy her soul. He tried to justify his lust for her sister by desecrating Tekyra in life and in death. He turned her body into a symbol of disgust, as if her sweat, her weight, her scent somehow excused what he had done. But what horrified people most was the simplicity of Tekyra's crime. She loved the wrong man, and she trusted the wrong sister. That trust was her undoing. And the silence in that courtroom, as the verdicts were read, spoke louder than anything else. Not all monsters wear masks. Some walk right through the front door, smile at your children, and call themselves family. Beneath the smiling family portraits and neatly trimmed hedges, this was never just a story about infidelity. It was a slow unraveling of humanity, where love turned into loathing, and loyalty became a weapon. Rashad Demry didn't just betray his vows, he destroyed the very woman who built a life beside him. Tekyra was dehumanized, mocked, and erased, not because she failed as a wife, but because she trusted someone who had long stopped seeing her as human. And Jasmine? Her role in this tragedy reveals how dangerous manipulation can be when wrapped in affection. She wasn't just a bystander. She fanned the flames, whispered poison, and stood by while her sister was reduced to a punchline in a private hell. This wasn't just a murder. It was the slow corrosion of empathy, the rot of entitlement, and the silence of a woman who thought love could save her. Could this tragedy have been stopped if Tekyra had discovered the truth sooner? Or was Rashad already too far gone, too consumed by disgust, pride, and obsession to ever walk away? And Jasmine, was she a pawn in Rashad's spiral, or the spark that lit the match? You decide. If this heartbreaking story left you stunned, like and subscribe, where we expose the darkest corners of love, betrayal, and the crimes that change everything.